All right, today we're diving into a technology that could seriously change the game for fighting our most dangerous fires. I'm talking about everything from electric vehicle fires to massive fuel spills. And believe it or not, it's a story that starts with a simple science fair project and ends with, well, a cryogenic blizzard.
I know, it sounds like something straight out of a superhero movie, right? But this isn't fiction. We're talking about a completely revolutionary way to attack the very heart of a fire, in a way that our old standbys, water and foam, just can't.
So let's get right into it. The heart of the issue is this. Our world is filled with all these new fire hazards, but a lot of the time we're still using tools that were designed for a totally different era. Our technology has taken these huge leaps forward, but our firefighting playbook, it hasn't always kept up. And this slide right here, it just lays out two of the biggest problems we're facing. You've got lithium-ion batteries, the ones in your phone, your laptop, and your EV. Water often does next to nothing to stop that internal chain reaction they call thermal runaway. And then for huge fuel fires, that foam we've used for decades, turns out it's loaded with toxic forever chemicals that are a massive environmental nightmare.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. 30,000 gallons from one car fire. So even when we manage to put the fire out with water, we've just created a second crisis, a massive pool of contaminated water that has to be treated as hazardous waste. It's like we're solving one emergency by creating a brand new environmental one.
So how do you even begin to solve a problem that big? Well, the answer didn't come from some giant chemical company. It came from a really personal quest, one that spans more than 3 decades, and it all started with a kid, his dad, and a little bit of dry ice. This whole journey kicked off 35 years ago. The founder, Carver Anderson, did an 8th grade science fair project on using dry ice to fight wildfires. His dad saw the potential and spent the 90s testing the idea on enormous diesel fires. But they could never quite figure out how to deploy it effectively. The delivery system just wasn't there. Flash forward decades later to 2020, and Carver finally gets the funding to crack that final piece of the puzzle.
And you gotta love this part, the truly human origin of this whole thing. Carver actually admits that it all started because his sister got first place in her science fair, and he was determined to one-up her with his dry ice project. It just proves that sometimes, the biggest world-changing ideas can have the most humble beginnings.
So, what is this thing? This machine called ELSA? How does it actually work? Because I'll tell you right now, this is not just some fancy new CO2 extinguisher. We're talking about an entirely new category of fire suppression.
What ELSA does is unleash what they call a cryogenic blizzard. It's this high-velocity spray of tiny solid dry ice particles that are suspended in super cold liquid nitrogen. Now think back to science class, the fire triangle, right? Fuel, oxygen, heat. Most methods try to remove the oxygen or the fuel, but ELSA does something totally different. It goes straight for the heat, which is often the hardest part to deal with. By yanking an incredible amount of heat out of the equation instantly, it just stops the chemical reaction of fire dead in its tracks.
And the process itself is actually pretty simple. The unit is pre-charged with this cryogenic slurry. You hit the trigger, and that blizzard just slams into the fire, instantly dropping the temperature to hundreds of degrees below zero. The dry ice smothers the flames, and as it sublimates, turns from a solid straight to a gas, it shoves all the oxygen out of the way. And maybe the best part? It literally leaves nothing behind but cold. No water, no foam, no chemical mess, nothing.
Okay, so a great idea on paper is one thing, but talk is cheap, right? Seeing it go up against some of the nastiest fires you can imagine, that's a whole other story. So let's see how ELSA actually did.
20 seconds. That's it. That is how long it took for one single ELSA unit to completely knock down a blazing 500-square-foot diesel fire. Just 20 seconds.
But the truly mind-blowing part was what happened after. People who were there said that just moments after the fire was out, they could walk right up to the fire pit, and instead of a smoldering, toxic mess, they saw frozen diesel icebergs just floating on the surface. The entire scene was cold, it was safe, and it needed zero hazardous cleanup.
So what about the final boss of modern fires? Lithium-ion batteries. To really get why these are such a nightmare, you have to understand thermal runaway. It's this violent, self-sustaining chemical reaction inside the battery. A fire that literally feeds itself. You can pour water on the flames all day, but if you don't stop that internal heat engine, it's just going to keep reigniting over and over again.
And this is exactly where ELSA becomes a game changer. That cryogenic blast does way more than just put out the flames. It hypercools the entire battery pack. This creates a cold break, stopping the heat from spreading to the next cell. It basically breaks the chain reaction of thermal runaway. Oh, and it also instantly freezes the toxic vapors, which means the smoke just stops instantly.
But here's the thing. Inventing a revolutionary piece of technology is really only half the battle. When you create something so new that it doesn't fit into any existing boxes, well, the world doesn't have rules for it yet. You have to write them yourself.
And that is a huge mountain to climb. Carver Fire is trying to make its way in a world that's been built around water and foam for a century. There are no safety standards for a cryogenic slurry extinguisher, so they are literally building the rulebook from scratch with safety labs like UL. They're also fighting against decades of inertia, trying to convince an entire industry that, when it comes to battery safety, we are still in the Wild West, and our old solutions just aren't going to cut it anymore.
So, when you pull the camera back, what does this all mean for the future? This isn't just about selling a new fire extinguisher. This technology really represents a fundamental paradigm shift in how we think about fighting fires, period.
We could be moving into a whole new era of what's being called clean suppression. An era where putting out a fire doesn't automatically mean causing catastrophic water damage, or creating thousands of gallons of hazardous waste, or poisoning groundwater with forever chemicals. It's about actually solving the problem without creating two new ones in the process.
And that really leaves us with a pretty powerful question to think about. For as long as any of us can remember, we've just accepted that fighting fire means making a colossal mess. But what if? What if we don't have to? This tech points to a future where, when the fire is out, the emergency is actually truly over.